Hi, everybody. I thought I'd start off my presentation on ability grouping by talking about the amount of time that track students spend out time of the classroom. And what I'm gathering from both things that I've experienced and things that I've read is that the time spent separated from the rest of the class increases pretty greatly as you go through elementary, middle school, and high school. So mostly I want to do this overview so that if other people have experienced different things or have seen different things that I have a knowledge of that. But from what I've understood, and I put the HAL program in there because that's what I experienced when I was in elementary and middle school. The elementary and middle schools are definitely smaller pull-out programs. And in my experience, it was only in math and reading. So there was a maximum of 2 classes that people that were selected for high ability learning could attend. The rest of the time, they were mainstreamed with the rest of the classes. And I think that's a really nice system. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in the pros. But I liked that it gave students that were functioning at a higher level a chance to think differently and critically outside the classroom, as well as mixing them in with everybody else throughout the rest of the day. In high school, it's kind of the same idea. In my experience, our HAL program at the high school level was replaced with AP and IB classes. And it wasn't very different other than the fact that there were more AP classes to choose from, which meant that if you took more AP classes, you were separated from the rest of the crowd more throughout your day. And then finally, I'm curious about specialists because in my experience, just because there's less classes for specialists to work with, they rely on differentiation much more than they rely on any sort of tracking or high ability grouping. I know that's what I do in my classrooms, and I'm curious if anyone has seen anything different. I think to go through the pros and cons, I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit. But to start off with the pros, I like that it lends itself to inspiring students to be around other students that love learning, are excited, and functioning at a high level. And the best example that I have of this, and kind of what inspired me to put the bottom point under pros, inspires go-getters to continue going and getting, is both what I experienced in elementary, middle school, and high school, and an experience I had afterwards. Just being surrounded by people that are excited about learning, that think so critically, definitely inspired me to want to go and do more, not just in school, but outside of school as well. My sister went to Stanford University, and there were a couple of times when I would stay in her dorm just to visit, and I would leave so inspired. I told my friends that I just wanted to go read a bunch of books because everyone was so smart and knowledgeable, and I was excited by that. And so it was a really neat environment to be around, and I think that's important for students that that have that thirst for knowledge to get that quenched through other people that have that same thirst. A big con, and something that really I struggle with, is the divisiveness that this can create in a classroom in a lot of different ways. I think we hear a lot about the difference between students labeling themselves and other students as smart and not smart, and how this can impact a lot of other things, especially if there's accidental subjective tracking, which I can definitely see how that could happen. If you look at someone's appearance and think they have it all together, and then they get tracked in a classroom where they might not belong, or vice versa. That can create a lot bigger chasm in the classroom, not just between academics, but also between minorities and low-income families and things like that. So that's a big concern. And then the other concern I have is just that natural self-fulfilling prophecy. If you see all the smart kids, I should say, leaving the classroom and you're not leaving with them, it might not inspire you to work as hard or to think you're as worthwhile as, or have as much potential maybe as other people do. So those are really, really big cons. But I think that there are a lot of pros as well. In my personal opinion, tracking is certainly not a perfect solution, but I think it's better than entirely mainstreaming, especially when the students are mainstream part of the time. I think it's important for them to have time to to think on another level. I thought a lot about Bloom's taxonomy, and I know from my personal experience, I felt like classroom instruction was the lower levels of the pyramid, and the things I got in my high ability classes or in my AP classes were kind of more critical thinking, analytical thinking, which is really important, and it carries through in so many different areas. So I think that's really important. And I think taking care of the social leadership side of that, making sure that those students are also influencing other students, is equally important, which is why I like them to spend time in the mainstream classroom as well. All of this reminded me of a video that I've seen multiple times in the education program and in the counseling program, and I'm sure many of you have seen it as well. But if you haven't, there's a great video on YouTube. I put the link in my post comments by Sir Ken Robinson. It's called Changing Educational Paradigms. And there's a section that he talks about our archaic way of organizing students. He says that we organize them by their age. I think he calls it like their manufacture date. And he says that that's silly. We should be grouping them with our learning styles or with their ability levels and things like that. So it's a really worthwhile video if you haven't seen it. And thanks for watching my presentation.